George Floyd was murdered on camera by a police officer. That video went viral, sparked the largest protest in history, considering the fact that they happened in the social media era. And people around the world were posting hashtags, black squares, taking a knee. We all know that part of the story. Most people don't know the data story, which is that the trend line for police violence only continued to get worse from the Trump era to the Biden era. And you can see now, back into the Trump era, we haven't reaped any successes, long-term successes from those protests. And the protests were, I think, maximally successful based upon what most folks were looking for, which is Derek Chauvin was convicted of murder. The city of Minneapolis paid a tens of $1 million settlement to the family of George Floyd, and several states banned chokeholds. Even the switch from Democrat or from Trump to a Democrat, Biden, many people would have thought that that would have had a benefit for police violence, and you just don't see it in the numbers. It's with that context that we view the murders of Renee Good and Alex Pretti. We can again have victories in the criminal court system and the civil court system and still be in the place that we are today with rising police violence year over year. What we have to do is ensure that we're out in front of a problem, unlike the court system, which is an after the fact intervention. It's called a smoke detector, not a raging inferno detector. What we do is create a mechanism to identify bad apples through upstream behaviors that just have to do with their normal core competencies of the job of being a police officer or a federal agent, referring to all of them as police or cops. And you can analyze that and see who's exhibiting levels of lawlessness that are unacceptable before they turn into tragic consequences of illegal use of force / death or multiple decades in prison for someone who's completely innocent. In the data world, we call bad apples outliers. In our early warning system, we call leading indicators. So let's take a look at a specific example here. We have an LAPD officer, Cheryl Rush. Cheryl Rush had 53 felony cases concluded in 2020. Of those 53 cases, 23 were thrown out due to insufficient evidence. 22 were referred to the city attorney for misdemeanor consideration. So simply looking at the ratio of, or even absolute number of insufficient evidence cases that were tossed aside, this tells us that this person has no grasp on the rules of evidence, the standards for evidence, or is disregarding them and making those arrests anyway. And two, doesn't understand the difference between a felony and a misdemeanor. So how would you have any confidence in the 5 cases that she did get a conviction on? Are these simply people who got tired of rotting in jail for however many days or weeks? We don't know. All we know is that her work is telling us that she's doing more harm than good, and there's really no reason to keep her on the payroll. And that's only from a black and white job performance standpoint, not from the inferred bad consequences of making a number of arrests. It seems that she makes a number of arrests that are not justified, and we know that what happens when you're making unjustified arrests. You have unjustified police chases. You have folks whose doors are kicked in for no good reason. You have all of these consequences. Obviously, again, when you try to effectuate an arrest, there's going to be the potential for use of force. So there are all of these other ripple effects from someone who's making arrests when there really is no sufficient legal basis to do so. This is one officer. We can multiply that out over an entire career. How many harmful consequences have happened? We don't know that anyone has been killed. We don't know that anyone has been wrongly convicted. We don't know that She hasn't allowed a serial killer uh, to be freed because of incompetent police work. We don't know those things, but we don't have any signal that is giving us confidence in the work that she's doing. All of the signals tell us the exact opposite. So if that's the case, then again, why would we wait until there's some tragedy that happens before we say we need to separate from this person because this is not the job that they should be doing? And then you multiply this sort of track record, you multiply that not only by her own, 30-year plus career, however long it is, you multiply it by the thousands of officers who have similar statistics, similar job performance. If a cop is using pretextual reasons to arrest people, they'll also use a pretext in order to try to justify an illegal use of force. Let's take swatting, for instance. Swatting is a propaganda term that sounds a whole heck of a lot better than describing these instances accurately. Police show up, guns drawn, screaming at the top of their lungs, banging on someone's door, maybe kicking in the door, then feeling threatened and killing the homeowner, the resident, based on zero credible evidence at all. The 911 call is the beginning of an investigation. Step two is to corroborate those claims. But 14-year-olds, losers in their basements, it's common knowledge that we can weaponize the police lack of investigative protocols, high desire to engage in urban combat. Those things can be weaponized against people's enemies. And this is what politicians won't do. They won't give us objective numbers that have to do with a person's job performance, not being convicted of a crime, not going viral for some tragedy. What job performance benchmarks does a person need to miss in order to be taken off the street, put on desk duty, and receive remedial training? That's the yellow area. Or dismissed from the force entirely. That's the red area. What benchmarks would be sufficient to say we're going to terminate this person's employment? Good luck in another field of endeavor. Because politicians won't step up and do that, that's the reason that devolved democracy says we need to take that authority back from the government, because they simply refuse to perform their obligations. And I'd love to be proven wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong so much, I'll pay you to prove me wrong. I'll give you $50 for any politician who replies on a social media account that's been verified. They give us two numbers. One, a number for a police officer to be taken off the street and receive remedial training for just regular job performance, not because they committed a crime. What benchmark would that be? It can be a percentage of arrests, it can be a absolute number. So that's one. And then the other is the number that would result in their termination. So that's two different numbers. If they reply with their official account, whoever is the person who got them to reply, I'll give that person $50. If they give us one number, that's $25. Two things that the internet loves more than anything else is proving people wrong and money. And you can get satisfaction in both of those areas. Uh, first come, first serve. If the same politician, is sent by 10 people, only the first person is going to get paid on that. But the point is, the larger picture is that if we get enough politicians to agree on these standards, then what happens? Let's take a look at Renee Good's murder. Her murder was precipitated by a wrongful arrest. You've seen nothing in the videos. You've heard nothing from Christy Nome and other government officials trying to label her as a domestic terrorist. There's no evidence there that would hold up to scrutiny. So her arrest would have been one of those that were thrown out. What does that mean? That means that if we can create cost at the point where this officer was trying to effectuate a wrongful arrest, three elements of that wrongful arrest. One, he said, get out of the car. That's where it began. Two, he tried to pull her out of the car. And three was the officer or the agent who stood in front of the car. That is essentially taking a person into custody. They're not allowing you to move freely anymore. So they were effectuating a wrongful arrest because they had no basis to arrest this woman. There's evidence that she was not obstructing them from going about their duties. There's a car that goes around her car. They could drive around and do whatever they wanted to do. So if we can create cost at that point where they say, you know, someone else has been pulled off the force who's been given death duty or has been terminated because of wrongful arrest, and I don't think that these guys would be on the force very long if these benchmarks were put in place, because they're so casual about arresting someone, not identifying what she's being arrested for, and just having no basis clearly to arrest this woman. These are people who would be yanked off the street. So when we look forward several years, like as if we were back in time at the point where George Floyd was murdered, if you could look forward from that time and say, if we had this in place, how many officers would not stand up to professional scrutiny? How many of these officers would have to be retrained or removed? And what consequences would that have on the 1,000+ people who are killed every year? For the latest information on the book, Devolve Democracy, join the movement on YouTube and Blue Sky.